In this video, we're going to start looking at creating a weather system for our level. Now, this is something because of what I want to do that I'll actually change at the end of the level just so I can see better, because I want mine to be a nighttime scene with a heavy storm. But I want you guys to have some time to really play around with this. There's some kind of hinky things with the weather in CryEngine, so I want you to have the chance to just doodle around a bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our file, we're going to save as, and we're going to make a test level. And we will just call this 3D Buzz 01 or whatever you've got, weather. And I had done this earlier. I thought I erased it out of there. I guess I didn't get it all. But so we've got this level. And now, as you can see, we switched over to that. So this is now basically a test level for us. But it's got the same things in it that our level has, so we'll be able to see better what we're doing. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is rain. There's many different ways for us to get rain in this level. So let's walk through a few of these. If we go over to our roll-up bar and open up our Entity tab, the first thing we're going to go to is down here to Particle. And we're going to drag in a particle effect, and we're going to remember to put our follow terrain on. Just drag this in here somewhere and set her down. Now we need to attach a rain particle to it. There's a couple different places in the database that we can do this. So let's open it up and go to our Particles tab. And as you can see, I've already got environment effects and weather loaded from when I ran tests. But you can always open and pull in environment and weather, and then you will have it ready to go. And now I've accidentally grabbed breakable objects, it looks like. So first, let's go to environment effects. Under environment effects, you will see rain, and you will see bound rain. So we're going to highlight that and just right click and assign that to our particle effect, which should still be selected, but you can double check that before you assign it if you like. And when we bring it in, you can see very lightly that we have rain. Now, all the settings basically have a lot of the same things listed, but they react very differently depending on which one you're using. If you're using this bound rain, you have a count scale of 1. Now, in this case, we can take that up as high as 100 before things really start to go crazy. If you go past that, you're going to have your screen wig out on you and go crazy. And this is a pretty decent rain. But it's still like a decent spring rain. We're not getting maelstrom or heavy storm here doing this. And that's the problem with this particle effect, is that it doesn't get really crazy. So we'll take that back to 1, and you see you still get just this regular rain. So what if we want to assign something else to this? Well, let's go back to our database again. In Particles. This time let's look at weather. And if we open up rain, we'll see space loop. Let's assign that. Now we get a slightly different looking rain with longer streaks. Now this one, you can't really go much above about 10. But that gives you a decent little downpour. That might work. Now, let's talk about some of the problems we have. If we go over here to our house and we take a look inside, it's raining inside. Even though our house does have rain occluder checked, it's raining. It's raining everywhere on our level. And with this particle effect, there's really not a whole lot that you can do about that I have been able to find. It's just going to rain. So this rain is best for open levels. And you'll also notice if we go up to our cave, it's raining through our voxel terrain also. So this type of rain is best for an open outdoor environment without any buildings or anything like that to affect it. So let's get rid of this particle effect. That's not really working out for what we want. Unfortunately, we're going to find that there are some bugs with just about every system for rain on here. Now, before we go any further, I am going to go in and I'm going to fiddle with my time of day. And I'm going to take that to night because I want a night scene, and how this rain reacts does depend heavily on the lighting in your scene. So we're going to take this up to 10 o'clock at night. And also, if you're going to go in and change your skybox, do that before you start adding these particle effects, or in a little bit when we talk about adding in clouds. You want to change your skybox before that. If you change it after, you can get some weird rendering artifacts once in a while. So anyway, we're here. Now let's go down to Entity again. Only this time, instead of particle effect, since version 3.3, they've added a rain entity. Let's grab that and bring it in. And that's got a little bit more control to it. And when we get closer, you see that this is a finer, better rendering rain. And we also get the effect of it affecting our terrain in terms of looking slick and wet. And if you get down really close on some hillsides, and let's crank up how much rain we got. We're set at 1. We're going to bring that up to 3 and make it really rain up in here. You can kind of see these rivulets of water running. It's a very nice shader. But once again, we have some issues. So now let's look at this rain, and I'm going to kind of set this where I want. I don't need it to cast shadows, so why bother having to do it? I've set my amount up to 3, which is kind of where I want it. And I'm also going to change my rain color to something a little more rain-like. Maybe somewhere in this very light blue. You can see that changes the way it looks too. It tightens up our reflections a little bit. We can see our water rivulets a little bit better. And we've got a nice heavy rain coming down. Now, I want to get rid of some of the glossiness and puddling and lighten that all up a bit. So we're going to take our glossiness, and we're going to put that at, instead of 1, we'll do 0.01. And down here in our reflection amount, we're going to take that to 0.12 or so. And it's a subtle change, as you can see. Puddle amount, we're also going to take to and we'll just knock that down to 2. Now you can see we're getting that nice, puddle amount, we might bring that back up. Now we're starting to get this nice reflection, but it's very light. And in this test phase, well, it's gone a little bit lighter than I would really like it to be. Maybe that 0.2, that looks pretty good. I'm also going to knock my radius up to cover my whole island, so we'll get that up around, say, 400. Which also helps the way that looks, because now the effect is covering more area. And that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, let's talk about some of these problems again. Well, if we go over here to our test level, switch our speed to 0.1. Now when we go in, this one's occluding correctly on this mesh. But let's go have a look at our lighthouse. Now, it would seem to be working. And here's the funny thing. It might be, or it might not. In this case, it seems to. Here's the thing, the occlusion is buggy on this rain entity since it's only been around since 3.3. In every other test I've done, it did not occlude in the lighthouse. Today, it's decided that it's going to. So that's great. Let's go have a look at our cave. We got lucky. And unfortunately, since this is a test level, when we go to our regular level, that may or may not work. Now, as you can see, still raining inside our cave. So we're going to try something with that. And we're going to go to our brushes. We're going to go to rocks. Well, natural, rocks, cliff rocks. We're going to come down and grab this rock plane. We're going to put that up in there. Get a little bit better position here. And we'll just, for now, we'll just take this over since it's a test. Now we'll go down and have a look-see. Kind of looks like it's still going. So let's, as we should often do, let's play test this. See what we have. Alright, it's occluding, so this time it worked. That's great. So we can resize that so that we can hide it inside that and get some occlusion. Now we can also see the rain outside, but I want to demonstrate something that can often happen. When you get in this occlusion, the deeper into the occlusion you get, you can see our rain has disappeared from our sight. Because our vision of what's going on is really what's being occluded here. We're not seeing the render. It's not that the rain's not there, it just occludes its render. So that is just something that you're probably going to have to give up when you're doing it. So that covers some of the problems we run into with rain. And you'll also notice it's raining but we have no sound, and I am not muted. That is something we will fix at the end of our weather section when we have this stuff all worked out. As you can see, we have nowhere in our parameters on rain to add any sound. So that's something we will fix. And if you look at the particle effect, you do have one that says enable sound, and if you check yes, there's still no sound. There's another way we have to deal with that. So, since we have several things to talk about, from wind and rain to fog and clouds, I'm going to break these up into sections. But I wanted to see what was going on, give you a chance to start playing around with this. The rain can be really touchy, and it's a good thing to get your settings worked out in advance. So, I'm going to end this video and move on to the next one, and in between, I'm going to make sure I record the values that I use for my rain. See you in the next video. Now that we've got our rain set up, there are a couple other settings that I want to look at before we continue with other effects. So we're going to go over to our second tab and go to Environment. And of course, we have our global fog settings, which we talked about in our time of day settings that you can change, which will change that really distant haze. But we'll get to fog in a minute, where we're going to set up a more local fog. The first thing I want to look at is in our environmental states, I want to look at wind vector. Now we want a really good storm, so we want a really good wind to go with it. Currently it's set at 1. If you want it going decently, you could make that 5. If you really wanted it going decently, you could make it 15. And you can either just hit 15 and bring it all in at an angle, or you can do 15, 0, 0 and bring it in at one angle. And basically what those vectors do is a positive y value would determine wind to the north, negative to the south, and then positive and negative x would be east and west. But you can just play around. If you really need the wind moving a certain direction, you can play around with that a bit. So alright, we've got our wind going now. As you can see, our trees are blowing a little bit better, so are our bushes. pretty decent, pretty strong. And we have our ocean, which is the next thing I want to change. Storm out on here is going to make our oceans go pretty good. So we're going to come down to our ocean animation, and we're going to change a few of the settings in this. Now, wind speed, you can either bump it up to your 15, but that's going to be pretty wild. For strong seas, we can go 9 or maybe 10. And you can see that change immediately there. It's starting to bump up a little bit more. We can speed up our waves since we have a stronger wind, just a little bit to 2. We'll leave our waves amount at 1 because really we've got some pretty good big waves and some pretty nice small wave activity in the shader. We are going to increase the size a little bit. Now if you really want a crazy ocean, you could bump that up to say 5. And that's really going nuts. But you better have some pretty high terrain. We'll see if any of it comes through here in just a second, but it will eventually at that height. When you're this close to the ocean, there we go, you're eventually going to have your ocean coming through your terrain. So that's a little too much for us. We're going to knock that down, probably 2. And this still looks like a pretty strong ocean rolling in. We could maybe get away with 3. And again, we'll spend a few seconds and watch and see if it comes through. I'm not seeing that happen, so maybe we can get away with that. So those things are going to go help sell that we have these strong winds going. See, there's some pretty hefty waves there. In fact, that's I think I like 2 better. That's a little bit too crazy. That is still a really strong ocean. So we're all set up there. Now that we've got those 2 things out of the way and our environment is starting to come around, the next thing we're going to have is lightning. So we're going to go back to our Entity tab, close out Environment, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to hop into particle effects and I don't want that. We want render. And down here you'll see clouds, flash, fog, fog volume, lightning, prism objects, view, and volume object. And what we want is our lightning one. Once again, we're going to make sure that we have our follow terrain. Just when we drag that in, we can see where it's going. And we can set that down somewhere here and take a look at a few of these parameters. Now, most everything's set pretty well. But we can come down here and effects and timing may or may not be rolled out for you. The lightning intensity is pretty strong, and when I throw in some fog, it's going to appear even stronger. So we're going to knock that down to 0.5. The light radius is fine, scale is fine. Now, sound. We'll come back to that in a second just because I don't want it happening over me. Our delay is every 5 seconds with up to half of that in a delay variation. So 2.5 seconds up to 7.5 seconds. That's quite a bit of lightning in a level. We're going to back that out a little bit. And we will set that delay to something like, what should I say, 40 seconds? 40 seconds will work. Delay variation of maybe 0.2. Lightning duration is fine. 1 second delay on our thunder, so it seems fairly close, is fine. With a ½ second either way delay, that'll work too, but you can always play with those. Last but not least, we want our thunder. So we're going to click on sound, and it'll give us this little tab to open up. And we'll come up in here, and you can find sounds in a lot of different places that you might not think you'd find it. So ambience natural, I would expect to find that, but all we have is an underwater sound. If we go to city and we scroll down, we get thunder distant. That should work pretty good for us. And then we'll look at a few other hiding places for some other sounds in there a little bit later when we get to that sound for our rain. Needless to say, all it really matters is that it pays very well to scroll through those and look in places where you think it might not be. So we've got our lightning set up, and for the sake of this I'm going to bump that delay back down just so we can see it. Oh, see, I saw my wave come through just a little bit there. So I would probably have to adjust that back. There we go. We get our flash and we get our thunder. So we're starting to sell our scene really well with weather effects. Let's look on to a few other things that we can add in here to make them even better. So next, we're going to take a look at clouds. I will see you in that video. Alright, in the next piece of our weather system, we're going to look at clouds. Now, I really wanted my nice full moon, starry sky off of our regular sky environment. The problem is it's raining like heck and there's not a single cloud anywhere. Now, as I said earlier, you can go into your Environments tab and you can change out your skybox, but make sure you do that first. Clouds are particularly where you will get artifacting if you haven't already set up the skybox that you wanted. But I'm going to leave mine for now, and instead we're going to go back to our entities, back down to render where we got our lightning, and we're going to grab a cloud. Once again, I'll bring this in using my terrain so that I don't lose track of it, and that's fine. But that's not a very stormy looking cloud. So we're going to go to our custom materials, open up our materials, go to clouds, and the first cloud that I'm going to use is a base cloud rain in shadow. I will apply that material, and then we will have a look-see, and you see we have a nice black cloud going on here. Now, Crytek recommends that you get your clouds to at least 1,000 units in the Z direction. I have pushed that down around 800 without anything too weird happening. But for now, we'll go with what they recommend. In fact, we'll go just a little bit higher. We'll go 1,050. And now we've got our clouds up there. Now there's a few things we need to set on our clouds. The first thing we need to do is set our auto move to true. The next thing we need to do is set our fade distance, and our fade distance is set to our space loop box, which is basically the size of your skybox. Now, all of Crytek's are going to default at 2000 by 2000 by 2000 square. We want our clouds, as they move across, to fade in and out at the edges of the skybox. So we're going to set that at 100, and it will fade 100 units coming in and going out. The only time you need to change the space loop box is if you've brought in your own box and you need to know what size that is so you can change that if you want to have clouds in there. So we're going to back this up a little bit. And we've got our clouds up here, which is just ducky. And I'm going to hit Control C and copy that. And then wonder where my other cloud thing went. Alrighty, well, it's right over there. It's just kind of hard to see at the moment. So now we're going to set this one up. We're going to set this one up with the base clouds rain 1, I think. Now, here's our other problem. And something I forgot to do. You should really do this first, so you may want to change that a little bit. But we're going to grab our clouds. The reason we can't see them is because, well, they're about the size of a house and they're 1,000 units up. So we're going to scale this way up. And we can hit Control T and find our other cloud or anything else we need to find. And now we're going to scale that way up. That one's going to be a little harder to see, probably especially in this video. There we go. And I'm going to change the other one to 1100. Oh, I did that in scale. I shouldn't have done that. Let's put that back to 90. Switch over to our Move tool. And they're both at 1050. And I want my white ones to be a little bit above my black ones. So now we have these both set. We have them on auto move, we have our fade distance, we're good to go. So that's going to traverse along the terrain, but I'm not sure that one set's enough. Now you don't want to get crazy with these. These clouds are kind of in the middle of your 3 cloud choices. Let's Control C to copy those. And we're locked in our X direction at the moment. We'll take our Y and we'll move that off over here somewhere. Change the way that looks a little bit so they're a little different. Basically you have 3 types of clouds. You have these 3D rendering clouds, which are kind of our middle choice. And then you have a much better one where you won't get any artifacting around the edges and you will get proper light reflection off the edges, but they're very expensive on the engine. And then you also have what are called distance clouds. And you can find those in the same area here. And they'll distance clouds are basically just flat planes with cloud pictures on them. They don't move, they don't track across the sky, they're not particularly pretty, but they're very, very resource protective on the engine. I don't like the way they look. You can have a look at them if you want, but I think they kind of suck, so we're not going to use those. We're going to use our regular clouds here. So now we've got all that set up, we're doing good. We've got 2 sets of clouds, they're looking pretty angry. We're in good shape. Now in our next one, we're going to have a look at doing fog for our final set. I'll see you in that video. In this video we're going to look at fog, but I should mention in the previous video I said distance clouds were in the same spot as the other clouds, and I was not thinking correctly. They are an entity, however they are under the miscellaneous tab right here for distance cloud. But basically it's the same thing. Switch yourself over to terrain, bring one in, scale it up to the size you want, get it way up there in the air, and then apply a cloud material to it. So more or less the same thing, just a little bit different spot, and I wanted to make sure that I let you know about that. But we're here to talk about fog. So let's go to entities, let's go back down to render, and in where all of our other stuff was, we will have fog volume. So let's drag in a fog volume, click that into place, and as you can see right now, our fog is very small, and it's right here, and it's very bright, and it's very white. So we have a lot of settings that we need to fiddle with. So let's come down and have a look at some of these. Now with fog, we have a choice of changing our color or using a global fog color. So this color will be matched to, basically really what it's matching to is your sky color up here. So you can see if we check that, that gets very dark. And then we have a whole bunch of other things that will change the nature of this fog. And then we have a size setting. Let's play around with those size settings first. Now I want this to pretty well cover our island. So we're going to set this at, say, 400. By 400. And we'll get to the Z size in a second. But let's go up a bit here. Now, if you've got one of those deep, spooky areas, low-lying valley, where you want that fog comes up to the knee and you can't see anything in it kind of fog, you're not too far from there right now. The fog you bring in is pretty close once you got it set to the height you want. But that's not the fog that I want. I want that kind of high, takes a really long time for the fog to fall off, very misty. You can see quite a ways through it, but it does start to get hard to see a little ways out. In other words, I want a fog that you're more used to seeing in real life from time to time. So now I'm going to bump my Z up to 60. So I want this to be pretty tall. I'm going to switch over to move here and back out a bit so I can see my fog thing. Now we're going to change some of these settings, and again, this comes down to a lot of experimenting in your level. I don't know anywhere for CryEngine, or really any other engine, where you can get a big list of what all of the settings for each thing does to get a particular effect. It's a sandbox editor, and by virtue of the name, I think you should be playing in it. So play around with a lot of this stuff, but to get the effect that I want to get, I will show you a few things to fiddle with. So we're going to come down to our fall off scale here, which is at 1. We're going to knock that way down to 0.1. And you can see it scales way up. And that's fine for the moment. We're going to be fiddling with it all here in a second. Now I'm going to take that shift and I'm going to knock it up to 0.5. Now here's where we really start to see this just seems like it's totally out of hand. But now we're going to change our density, or destiny, if you guys watch Back to the Future. I'm your density. And we're going to knock that ridiculously down. I'm going to set this to 0.0001. We're going to keep soft edges, and I am going to change my fog color manually. I'm going to darken that up a little bit, but not as much as the sky would have darkened it. And now we can just grab our Z direction and start to pull this up. And you can see our fog box here, and it's 60 units high. And we're going to pull that up almost till the whole box is out, so that we get this kind of heavy mist that falls off in the distance. And that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the way that is. And we can reset. I mean, you can get that so you really have a low to the ground fog that's not very visible up close. We can really take this up. If we took this up to, say, 75 units in Z, well, that would actually be way above it. Let's take it to 40. There we go. That's awfully heavy fog, but depending on your game level, you might want that. We're going to bring it down just a little bit more. So I want that haze. You got a heavy rain, so you're not going to have a super heavy fog. We've already got a lot of wind and a whole lot of other things going on. We don't need it to be too crazy. We got our thunder blaring, although I have it muted at the moment. We have lightning in the sky. We've got our clouds. We're all set up. The last thing that we need to do is create sound. So let's take a look in our next video at how to add sound. In this last portion of our weather series, we're going to take a look at creating our range sound. And really, for ambient sounds, this is what you're going to do with pretty much everything, but we'll use it right here. As you can see, we got our fog volume hanging out there. I'm not really intending for anybody to leave this island or swim out, at least not for these purposes. So, we're just going to go ahead and create a little wraparound area. We're going to stay in our Objects tab, but we're going to go to Area, and we're going to choose Shape. I'm going to set this on X and Y. And we will just grab a shape out here, and you can see this line pulling out. And we will just keep going like this all the way around our island. And you just click everywhere you want to point, left click. Just going to keep clicking our way around until we get back to where we wanted to start. And to finish it off, just double left click quickly. And now we have a shape. Alright, now that we're all set up there, it should be noted that if you have a height on here of 0, that should be infinite. You can set a height that you want it to be. If you want, say, a shape with an ambient sound that's in a little valley and you don't want it to sound like that up on top of the hill if they can get there, you can set a height that is at. We'll try setting this at a height of 100, and then you will see that this pops right up there, plenty high for what we need. So now we just have to create our sound. Alright, now if we go down here, oh, and by the way, let's click this again. If you're working and this is hard to see for whatever reason, if you're using a much smaller thing, you can go into this display field and check that true, and it will give you this whole thing. And that can be handy because if you look, even though we had it set on XY, we're a little bit above our terrain, so we're going to want to bring that down. There we go, much better. Now if we go down here, and we unmute, go to Game, we don't hear any sound. Of course not, because we haven't attached anything to it. All we've done is create a shape. So now we have to attach something to that shape. So we're going to go into Objects and into Sound, and then we're going to come down to Ambient Volume. And I'm going to, well, we'll leave that on for a second just so we can hear what we're doing. I'm going to click on my terrain again, bring in this Ambient Volume, and in this case, it really doesn't matter where we put it so much. Because once we attach it to this shape, the shape is going to determine the size. You can see the size of it right now as it's set, but we're going to override that, basically. So let's scroll down here. And let's go to our name category under our ambient volume properties. Click on that. Open that up. And if you remember earlier, I was talking about you really got to look around for some of this stuff. You can go, if you look under racetrack, you get an ambient rain. Probably going to sound like an ambient rain on asphalt, I would guess. You can get a beach ambience in there. If we go to fantasy, we have rain drips before corridor. I believe we also have, rain ambience right above it. And you can hear that kick in. And that's pretty good heavy storm rain, so we're going to use that. Alrighty, now we just have to attach it to our volume. So we're going to go up here And we're going to grab this, and anywhere, if you see the outline of this, if you grab that, it'll highlight it in orange and say shape 01 or whatever shape it is. That's where you can grab this and select this. We're going to go back to that, to our shape, and we're going to come down to target. And we're going to click pick, and then we're going to pick our ambient volume. And you will see that show up there. And now we can unclick pick, or we could pick another ambient volume. Maybe if we had brought in a sound for the seagulls that were flying around during the day, we could add those in to this same volume since we want that everywhere. So you can put multiple things in here. For now we'll just do this. So we'll undo the pick and we'll go down. And as you can see, and if you don't hear anything, or in the case of some particle effects, see anything, like we discussed earlier, just try moving in and out, and it'll usually get that rolling. So we've got pretty good thunder, pretty good rain. We have fairly successfully set up a nasty storm going on. So that'll conclude this set of videos on changing your weather patterns. You can see I'm going to have to change my water. I just saw that bump up. But once you've played around in your level here, make sure you write down all these settings since you've matched your level to your final level. And then at the end, if you wanted something like this where it's dark and nasty and it may be hard to see with the other things we're going to do, you can save those and come back and plug them right in, and you'll be in good shape. So, in the next set of videos, we're going to go back to looking at another particle system and include a light with it. I'll see you in the next video.